Would you show us about your loose, glowing representational watercolors?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. I'm glad you took care of some of that business. Then I can just shorten it up. But thank you for everyone for being here.
Glenn, we have a double sound for some reason.
It shouldn't be coming from me. I have one thing on.
Well,
I turned somebody off, Carol.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Is
Okay.
it all right? Yeah, because I heard it too. I could hear
People are
something.
not muted, guys. Carol, you have to mute people.
I muted everybody.
They're not muted.
Well, the only person, there's
Mike?
nobody unmuted at all at this point, except for the two administrators and Mike and Glenn.
Okay, I don't hear the background noise anymore.
No, there's no, we're okay.
Good. Okay, great. Well, again, hey, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to people. It is, as I was saying earlier, if you missed it, when I do workshops, I don't really do a lot of workshops. I actually like to paint and get out there. But when I do get requests to do workshops, we put some together. They're generally 3-day workshops. So this is kind of a challenge. I've done it once before, condensing so much information to something that we can do in 2 hours and not overwhelm you. I probably will overwhelm some people. I just have that tendency to go, talk, show things. So hang on if it's a little much, but I do try to put information out there. I don't want to hold back. If I can think of something, I'll just throw it out. So there are times where I'll be painting or drawing or talking, and then something will just come into mind, and I'll throw it out or pick up a piece of paper and show you what I mean. And it can bounce around a little bit, but I really do try to give as much information that I have learned or what I've heard, and try to pass that on. I think most people who paint or artists kind of understand that you're always learning. It doesn't matter how long you've been painting, you're always learning. And so if I hear something fun and interesting, I pass it on. So as Mike said, I've been painting ever since I was a child. My parents were both professional artists. They were art majors. My younger brother as well, he went to Kutztown too as an art major. I did not go to college as an art major. I went into the military and did a number of other things you could see on my bio. I'm not gonna bore you with all that. But I've been painting on and off ever since I was a teenager, doing it for money on the side here and there. I don't want to get too far into all the other details, but to make money, like most people understand, it's hard just to jump in and make money as an artist. So after I got out of the military, I went into state government work. I was a Pennsylvania state trooper. I was assigned to the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force for about 9 years. I was a criminal investigative supervisor, detective with the state police. But all the while, I would still go and do art shows. I would have one-man shows. I was showing at the Chatsworth Gallery. And on vacations, I would travel, take workshops, or go painting somewhere. Traveled over to Europe and would do painting classes. I would take classes or just go out and do things. So when I was able to retire at an early age, after putting in 25 years with the state, I was doing art on the side. I was doing shows. I was traveling. So it was just natural to retire and just continue with the art and put more time into it. So that's what I'm doing. And I enjoy it. And I enjoy meeting people and doing things like this. So I don't want to go too far into all that background because I'm going to try to cram some things in tonight. And hopefully those people who saw my video clip talk briefly about what I'd like to try to accomplish tonight. And depending on what kind of time we have, I might just throw a few extra things in. A brief walkabout here. I'm disconnect this camera. Hopefully we don't have too much trouble. But quickly, I think most of you have seen my bio, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But this painting was, I don't know, it won some award in the Pennsylvania Watercolor Society show years ago. But this is a snow scene. Most of my snow scenes, I try not to use white paint, but if I do, that's fine. I really don't think there's a problem with it. I like to try to tackle it without first, but if I have to, and have the sun coming through, we're going to try to maybe do something with sun coming through the trees tonight. As Mike said, I try to paint a realistic feel, but impressionistic. I try to, some light coming through the trees. I try to represent something without putting all the brushwork into it, only in the details, the finer details with the figures and some of the little lines. But I try to capture what I'm doing without spending a whole lot of time painting. Now this big one, I might do a little demo if we have time, something similar to this. This was actually on a large sheet that I didn't even know what the paper was. I'm kind of fussy about my paper, so I just tested this. This is probably about an hour painting that I worked on to do that. So we're going to go over different things tonight, but mostly it's going to be about light and glow with the snow scene. Hopefully that's some, everybody got a chance to look at. I might do something with a street scene if we have time. And then I also was talking about something that just kind of fell in my lap, actually by accident, was these really fast watercolor snow scenes or landscape. But it turned out I was teaching a private lesson, and I was showing about splattering paint for background trees and shrubs and that sort of thing. And they didn't quite understand what I was telling them when I was just doing it in a little spot. So I quickly put trunks in and a creek and some shadows, and just did this real fast just so they could understand what I was talking about. And it maybe took, I don't know, 10 minutes at most, a small little watercolor, but it actually turned out really well. And they loved it. And I surprised myself, like, oh yeah, I meant to do that. It just kind of happened. So I did another one the next day, and that kind of turned out. And I thought, well, that, those happy accidents, that was kind of fun. So if we have time, I might attempt that. I'm going to try, is just show you some loose brush work, fun exercises to get in there and just explore and try things. And that's what I like to do. I like to push the limits. I think a lot of you artists and a lot of people paint, you see that there are artists who have a technique and a style, and they follow that technique and style. And if it works for them, that's great. I sometimes think that you can pick out my work, but not always. I'm willing to risk it and do something completely different than I normally do. And if it fails, it fails. But I think what really helps a lot of artists is if you're willing to get out of your comfort zone and try something that maybe you would never want to try. Because I know in workshops, particularly when you have a crowd around you, everybody's kind of afraid to do something that looks awful, and then everybody's going to see, oh, it looked awful. And you get worried about it. So in an environment like this, or when you're at home, it's nice, just try something you're not comfortable with, and so what if it doesn't work, and throw it away or flip it over. A lot of my paintings that turn out to be failures, like I did this Syracuse, think of Carol, Syracuse, Sicily, a few years ago. We were there, and I did this recently, but I did something on the back that didn't work out. I started out doing lights, and I didn't like it. I flip it over. I'd say probably half of my paintings have a painting on the back. I don't know if everyone else does that.
Glenn, I have a question.
Yes.
What size do you commonly paint on? That size?
I bounce around. I really do. I'll work on small pieces. So generally what I like to do is when I think of an idea, I'll work out a mini sketch. So something small, I'll look at maybe doing a little miniature scene. And if I like it, then I usually jump right to a full sheet. I'll try to do a full sheet.
Okay.
And, I bounce around that, but I really think with watercolor particularly that I found is sometimes when you're doing these small small paintings, I know people sometimes get locked into doing them because they're quick, they're fun, they're easy. But the problem that I have is the watercolor doesn't get a chance to do its thing. It's hard to get it to flow and move when you're in such a confined little area. So sometimes they just don't glow, and they just don't feel right because they're just too small to get the water running and mixing and mingling. So that's why I like to go bigger, because I can get that effect and that feel. So whenever I can, I really try to push it. Sometimes I'll roll out a custom roll, cut it, how it rolls back up. You got to try to wet it, flatten it, put it down on the board, and even try to go as big as I can. The hard part about that is just having a paintbrush and a thing to mix it in to cover it all. But yeah, I do like to go large if I can, outside the small ones. So what I'm going to show you, I did it in the video, so I won't go over too much. So with just the snow scenes, there's so many other things that I do, but I've been asked in the past to do these for workshops. This is just a print of a painting that I did do. The original is a full sheet that somebody has. And I want to talk about today about getting light in the water like this, just get this glow. It's kind of fun glow. And I discuss the light in the trees as well. I did this just the other day as a rough sketch, just to kind of figure out what I want to maybe talk about tonight. So I was playing with different colors and paper. This is a photo. Well, I showed these, I think, in my video. So these are photos of some paintings that I don't have anymore, but I did do. So hopefully some people got started on a sketch. If you want to follow along, I'll try to go at a pace where I'll show you what I'm doing. I'll talk about it, and then kind of slow down a little bit, and then tell the people, like, why don't you try this now? Let me kind of demo it first, tell you what I'm doing, and then you kind of jump in, and I'll talk you through it a second time. I'll kind of go through it as people do it. I know it's going to be a little hard on video to try to do. So I think the first attempt we're going to jump into would be, talk about a few things first, but the water and then the trees. We're never going to be able to finish all the detail, but I want to cover what I think is the important parts of the painting. And before I get started with that, a number of artists have their theories and ideas of what they like and what works best for them. For me, I'd like to look at something just like everybody else. Probably you're out and about and you're like, wow, that'd be a great painting. How do I do that? Would I do the background first? How would I do the sky? And so you try to work out those details. I do those on little pieces of paper. But you also try to figure out, and one of the things that I see that a lot of students, sorry about that, saw that fall. A lot of students will sometimes do is they'll go out in life, or they'll take a photo and they'll copy it exactly. And I always tell people, try to add and delete things. Don't put everything you see from a photo or out in life in there, because sometimes you just have an ugly rock. It's a big round egg looking thing, and it doesn't really look like a rock, but it's there. And I've seen where some, usually students and beginners, but some artists will, because it's there, they paint it. And then it confuses the people looking. So I always tell people to kind of add, delete. If the rock is ugly, make it a pretty rock. If the tree is half dead, don't paint it in or move it and paint something nice. So, the first thing I like to do is go out, find a scene that I like, figure out what could stay in, what could go out, unless it's a commission where it has to be exactly that way. I just decide what I want to add, what I want to delete, what time of day I want to do, and I do it. I do a lot of paintings just out of my head. A lot of these snow scenes and things, I just make them up from experiences I had. And for me, it works well because I think a lot of us who have painted from photographs and have done still life paintings, there's a lot of studying that you have to do. You look at that rock and you try to get it right. You look at those branches, you try to get it right. Well, you lose that spontaneous feel to the painting when you're trying to go quick and get some loose. If you're trying to do something impressionistic, I'm not talking about photorealism, but if you're doing something loose and impressionistic, you want to keep that brush moving and keep things flowing. And sometimes I feel like if I stop and study a photo or life, it starts to dry and I don't get that spontaneous feel. So whenever I have a chance, I just sit down and make stuff up, and I go as quickly as I can just to get that spontaneous feel. And I think the most important aspect for what I find interesting in paintings is value. Playing with the value. I may have to add some more value, change it around a little bit, but I think that really is the secret to successful paintings, is when you have value changes. You have dark darks and light lights. Not everything's mid-tone, that you have some variety and interest. So with that, I do want to talk about that. I want to show a quick demo that just came to mind. I was sketching here right before we got started, but I do want to talk about that briefly. And some people will ask, and as I move this camera, I'm going to talk about this. Some people will ask about materials. And I had mentioned in one of your classes that I sat in on that I personally, just for my own personal reasons, I prefer Arches watercolor paper. It stands up to the scrubbing. It stands up to some of the things that I need to do. So I prefer that, but I think that's the most important part in a watercolor, is getting quality paper. If you're painting on, forgive me if people disagree with me on this, but you're getting like some sort of Strathmore or whatever it is that you buy at the store, or you get at Michael's or something like that. It just, make sure I get this right. It just doesn't give you the results that you want. Carol, am I upside down or am I good?
No, you're
Oh,
good.
you're fine.
Okay, good. So I always tell students who come to class, they always want to know what to bring. And I say, most importantly, have good paper, because you're not going to have success if you have cheap paper. You're just going to struggle, and you're never going to get the technique down if you keep using cheap paper. And invariably, they come to class with cheap paper because they saw how much the arches cost, and then they struggle with getting things to work. So I really would encourage people who are doing watercolor, if you really want to have some success, find a paper that works well for you. Generally, it's going to probably be better paper, and go with that. Try to avoid the cheap paper unless you're, I don't know, if you're just playing with color or just messing with your colors. Even practicing sometimes. I do have some cheap paper that I sometimes will do a figure or something like that. But I think that's the most important part of painting is your paper. And then after that, it's the brushes. I think if you don't have, I try to use as big a brush as I can. If you get little brushes, you get a little dab, 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 you're gonna have trouble. So I think little brushes, I'm gonna put a piece of paper up here. When I'm having a class, let's see how this works here.
That's good.
Okay, when I have a class and I'm talking to people and they're painting and doing things, they'll have little dab, dab, dab marks, and it just doesn't have that watercolor flow and wash and feel to it. And I try to encourage people, try to use the biggest brush that you possibly can for that area and still control it. Because if you're doing a sky, or you're doing grass, or just foliage, if your brush strokes are just, one after another, it starts to dry, and then you get this mix and mingling of dry and wet, and things just get overworked. And I think we've all been guilty of overworking and killing a painting. And that's one of the big problems, is all this dab, dab, dab. So when you use small brushes, but if you jump in with a bigger brush and try to get a wash going, it just has a nicer effect when you're putting colors down, that you can blend them and mingle them, as opposed to just, going back and forth with a small brush. And while it's wet, you can add color to it, and you can get it to run. So I like to push myself and use big brushes. Mop brushes are helpful, a few round brushes, a couple riggers, but I think it's helpful. And that's probably the second most important part, is your brush. Paint, I don't really have a real strict brand, but I do like to be consistent. So I generally use Winsor Newton, only because I know what it'll do. If you go to the paint store, art store, and you buy cerulean blue in one brand, and you go back and buy cerulean blue in another brand, you're going to have different results usually. And that always frustrates me when I'm like, it's not what I'm used to. So I stay consistent when I can with the paint as well, because I think that helps. And what I'm going to use today, which anybody who's maybe ever done similar work, a water bottle. This is a Cepacol or something like that. I dump the stuff out and put water in it. This is an invaluable tool for me to re-wet, to go into an area, to mix paints together, to run them, to splatter. I couldn't paint without having spray bottles, and I have several of them around. They're very helpful. And it's one of the things when people have class, they say, besides paper, you have to have a water bottle. We'll work through the brush problem, but you'll have a lot of fun. And I like to have a bottle that not just sprays a mist, but one that if you half pump it, you can get little droplets. And the little droplets can make interesting texture, or you can just wash it out altogether. You can do all kinds of fun things. So I like to look for a bottle that can handle both light little pumps of droplets and spray. So they're really my biggest materials that I like to use. I do prefer the white tape around the edges, just so I can wipe it clean and see it again. That's just a personal preference thing. So I'm going to talk briefly. I'm going to jump off track here and talk about one of the things I think is important first. I did this right before we got started. I wanted to just mention this for those of you who are maybe fairly new to watercolor, you're painting. So for those who've been painting for years and
Can you move it up
already
just a
know,
little bit more? There you go.
there we go.
There's a shadow. Yep, good.
And I'll start here, maybe. So I'm not even really going to paint a painting, but I do want to talk about for those people who are fairly new to watercolor and are trying to figure things out. And I'm going to kind of jump right into painting without too much classroom lecture and just talk as I go. So let's see how that works out. So I quick did a sketch. And one of the things that I want people to understand when you're talking about landscape, I think a successful landscape, it's imperative to have value changes. You have to have at least 3 value changes. You have to have that background, midground, and foreground. If you forget to push things back into the background and you just kind of have the mid values, it's going to be flat. And a lot of times I'll have students show me their work, or someone show me their work and say, I don't know, this my landscape, I'm just not happy with it. And it's usually they don't have those defined background, midground, foreground. It's kind of just maybe it's 2. You really should have 3. If you have 4 or 5, that's fine, but you really should have 3 fairly distinct parts of your painting. And with the background, the graying down, the less color, you push it back. So let me just show you what I mean here. So I'm going to just, and the other part of this, when I'm doing the background, midground, foreground, the background always looks better. And I do spend a lot of time in my class on this. I'm just going to shorten it to as quick as I can, but you want to have it soft. You don't want hard edges. You want a kind of gray, blue, purple background. I personally just think it looks more interesting if it's a little bit misty and purple, gray, blue, something of that sort. One of the mistakes that a lot of people will do when they're painting landscapes, particularly beginners, is they look at the hills in the background and the background trees, and their mind says green. They're green trees, it's green background. And so they start painting the landscape. The background hills are green, the midground, everything's green, and it just becomes flat. And I say, really look at that background, because it's really blue, gray, it's grayed down, and there's not a lot of detail. Your mind knows it's green, and so you're saying green, but really don't make it green if it's your background. So purple it, mingle it, but I do add a little extra fun to it. I like to mix and mingle the value and some colors. I throw in various colors. And in the beginning, it looks like, I don't know about that. But once everything comes together, it really can be pleasing if it works out okay. So I'm going to briefly just talk about my background trees and show you what I mean. So it doesn't really matter. I don't know if you can see my palette, but the palette's not really all that impressive or important.
No,
Yes.
it's nice because it's messy.
Yes, and it's usually messier, but I had to add paint to it, and so it got a little clean, because usually it's just a mess.
It looks like mine.
Yeah, I can relate.
I had, when I'm doing a larger painting, this egg container that you would have in a refrigerator, I filled up with my paints years ago, and I can really get them swirling around there. So if I'm going larger, I usually go right to this, and it's been really handy. So when I'm talking, just this is a little landscape and similar concept. Cliche-ish, I understand, but I was just trying to think of a cityscape or building, so I just made up this Venice looking thing, just to show you that either way you can incorporate the two. So maybe I'll mist it down a little bit, dampen it. You can dampen the paper. I know some people dampen the back and tape it down, or dampen it, let it dry, or mingle it. I don't have a real strict feel on that, but I just kind of go with it. So if I'm going to do my background, I just try to get it going kind of quickly. And whether it's some cerulean, cobalt, some reds, some browns, I just start adding color to it and push it around. Whoops. I don't really worry too much about what the color is. I just start adding some different colors to this and try to mix and mingle my background trees. I think it really makes it interesting when you do various colors and then values. You darken it in spots, a little lighter in spots, slightly better. And trying to remember when you're doing watercolor, for those who understand that the struggles, how many times you paint a painting and it looks just great, and then you come back a couple hours later and dry and escaped from your painting. It's like, where'd it go? It looked great a couple hours ago, and it dries a lot lighter. So I do push my values right from the start, knowing that when they dry, they're going to be a lot lighter. Should really go a little quicker than this. And I'm just keeping in mind that these are just background trees and they don't really mean a lot. Let's see, it doesn't really matter the color so much. I want to keep them gray, blue, some greens. I want to add little droplets of water, excuse me, add a little bit of texture to it, and recognizing that this is going to dry lighter. And then just, if I want to design some trees, then I can just do maybe the tops, get it to look maybe like a tree on the top on some of them, whether it's an evergreen tree. And I can put some of the evergreens that are misty and in the background, just the top after I mingle some things together. Get some darker values down in here, maybe while it's still wet. So my background is going to be just kind of soft and mingling of colors. So whatever I wind up doing here with the, I'm not going to worry about the grass so much. I'm going to show you the background. I try to get it in quickly so it mingles. Whoops. Brush here.
That brush looks like it's been used for a lot.
It's a
Yeah,
pretty scraggly looking brush.
yeah. What I like about it is it shapes to whatever you want. So I can make it like that, or I can get it to form a point. So if I want to do some more lines, or I can really mush it and get it to just do more of a foliage looking thing. So kind of let that dry. And of course, we all have seen get a few trees maybe in the background. So that's roughly when I'm first doing a painting, I'm looking at the background, and whether you make it a little more purple, a little more blue, a little more, but just a kind of a blue, gray, green, hazy in the background. And as I come forward, a little more dark. And the same thing can be said for doing the city scene. So if you're doing a city scene, and jump into this quickly, do the same exact thing instead of trees or buildings. So if my background, tissue is invaluable as well. Oops. Do the same thing back here. I just kind of, my background, well, I'm going to dampen that as well. And just come across quickly. Add colors, and then I kind of mingle them. Certainly when I'm doing a real painting, when I'm doing these sketches, it's just kind of fun. When I'm really trying to do a real painting, I take a little more time, but I still try to come up with the same concept of soften that back there a little bit, mixing and mingling values and colors. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. It just dawned on me before we got started to kind of talk about these background scenes, that it helps to soften them and do colors that, what is that? Got a little green glob there. And depending on how misty of a day it is or what I'm doing, whether I make it darker, lighter, softer, you can hit it with the spray bottle and really soften it up. And I think you've both seen people paint similar things with watercolor where you're getting soft mingling colors, whether you bring it down in a bead and just work it across. But I do like to add colors and just kind of make it fun, whether it's trees or buildings. It's kind of basically the same thing. They're all going to be a little different depending on what kind of colors I want to put into it or how gray. Whoops, that didn't work out. Little mist, little haze. So that's just the idea is try to, when you're doing background, try to mix and mingle it and not worry too much about detail if it's setting back, whether it's the trees, the buildings. I got a little messy. So I just come across and add colors and, if there's trees sticking out and I have buildings or whatever it might be, that got a little messy on me because I'm rushing along here trying to get to the next step. But I try not to do too much detail be in the foreground. And I had some things that I did earlier and I'll show you. This was a class. So this was a demo I did for another class, very similar, where, little gray purple background, kind of the water, the sky was done quickly, a very similar idea. There's just to do a purple gray kind of background. And so when I'm doing my trees, I try to think of just keeping it simple, mixing and mingling colors. So I just want to talk about that because it dawned on me before we start that I want to mention that before I jump in. So, all right. The first thing I want to do is what I was talking about earlier with getting a glow in the water. And as I mentioned, these background trees can either be splattered, which I'll probably do, or I can mix and mingle like I did the background and then put some trees over top of it. And then you don't really see all that sloppiness. You just see various colors and things going on that are kind of interesting instead of just one solid color.
Is the blue
Okay.
there the masking?
Yes. See, where am I here? So the blue, the mask fluid is always tricky. I do like the Pebeo, the drawing gum. It has the color so you can see it. So it's got that gray blue color so you can see where you're putting it. Some of those store brands that you get at the box stores are a little too white for me. So I like to be able to see it. And this goes on a little thinner. It's not terribly thick, so it goes on a little thinner. I just put it on, brushed it with my finger, and just to cover the areas because I want to wet this. So I'm gonna jump in, get those purple out of there. All right. So my idea is that the light, and whether I do sun actually coming through, which I did mask that, but I don't know, or just this area is going to be brighter. This is where the color or the light is coming through the foliage, right in about here. And then the rest of the water is going to pick up the reflection. I can start with doing the trees first, or I can start with the water. So let me see. I think I'll jump into the splattering first. So I do have to cover that. So I'm going to splatter my sky or my background for my trees because I like that technique of, and imagine some of you have seen it or have done it, where you're just trying to get foliage, and it's hard to get the foliage by painting everything in with a paintbrush. So sometimes it's fun just to throw it, mix, mingle, particularly if it's going to be stuff that's in the background, even the foreground. It reads well once it's done. At first, it looks like a real mess, but once you kind of work it and get done, it can be interesting. Now I'm just going to splatter just to test out my brush here, so I can throw the droplets. It's a mess too. It really looks horrible at first, but it really, I think it's a lot of fun. I'll just kind of test this out before I go on mine. Again, I just throw in various colors, in the middle where I want the light, I'm going to put like yellows and lighter colors, and then I'm going to move to darker colors around the edges where the light doesn't come in as much. So I would cover that if that were the painting. So I'm going to splatter. I got to find a good brush, and then I come in with the squirt bottle, and I just kind of activate all that, get it to look like foliage. And at first, it's not going to make a lot of sense if you have not done it before, tried it. But you can get a lot of really fun effects and practice with it and play with it. If it's something that you've seen before, interests you, you can do all kinds of things, whether this is brambles, shrubs, somewhere in a field, wild flowers or grass. You can pull it up like that. You can put trunks in it. You can, when it dries, I can come in with some darker colors, but you can get some real interesting effects. So I'm going to jump in on mine and show you. I'm going to go ahead and do it, but it can be kind of fun. You get tree trunks coming in, and it's something that you can never do with a paintbrush just by painting it in. So I'm going to get that in first, and then I'm going to come and do the water, which is real fun. Okay, so cover this up. Good enough. Guess I'll keep that. I'm not so sure I like that, but I guess I'll keep that. All right, so the idea is to start with the glow. So I'm going to try to throw the best I can, and I let it happen. So a lot of times I'll throw stuff and see what it looks like and then go with it. Instead of trying to make it do exactly what I want, I get it down there and see what it wants to do, and then I work with that. I get better results in forcing it in one direction or another. So yellows, reds, browns, something like that here, and then a little darker and other colors out there. Since it's snow or whatever's going on in background light, it's nice to also leave that white. And I'll mention that it does get hard. People have a hard time. If you put too much water down, you're going to lose it. So that's that balance of droplets and water and then letting it go for a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start with some yellow and just try to get it in there the best I can. And I have to work quickly because I don't want it to set up too much. I want to be able to hit it with my squirt bottle and activate it. And it's that balance of trying to not do too much, get it to read the right way. So I'm just gonna put some yellows and oranges. I did grab a burnt umber because I didn't have the brand, the Winsor Newton that I usually like. And I don't really like this burnt umber. Found it in my drawer and I ran out of Winsor Newton and it just isn't quite the same. It's a little muddier. It's fun when you're doing well, I can't stop now, but I had a, well, here we go. This.
Are you just using warm colors?
Yes, little, mostly warm. Around the edges, I don't mind the cooler colors. This painting is a photo of a painting that I did. I have all kinds of colors: cerulean, turquoise, cat scarlet, all kinds of color droplets I threw in the background. I masked the branches and then threw everything on and pulled the mask off and had the snowy branches. But all that's just all kinds of color. And the original painting, which is a full sheet, really turned out nice. At first, when you're working on it, you think, uh-oh, I don't know. But it really did turn out nice. So I like to throw all kinds of colors in there, the warmer ones in the middle. I think the cerulean and even a turquoise and some red would just make it interesting. You see these little droplets. If you study, you think, I don't know if that belongs there. But when the painting's done, it really is kind of interesting to have these little flecks of color here and there that you know, your eye just reads it as foliage. Get some darks over here. And I may go in a second time with darker darks. Just want to quickly get some of this down. And it looks awful if you've never seen it done before. It's just like, I don't know about that. Glenn, I think you're going in the wrong direction. but I want this to just be a mix and mingle of foliage in the forest. More orange. More yellow. Brighter yellow, maybe. Some real darks, some blues, all kinds of colors. And what I'm going to try to do is mirror a lot of this same color then down in the water. All right, I'll stop now and then see if I need to do a little more. All right. Okay, that looks awful. Here we go. Hopefully you can see. The more water I put, the more it explodes, but I got to be careful I don't get a big puddle. So I got to kind of go easy at first.
It's almost like the spray bottle is putting more color on it.
Yeah, it really explodes and gets interesting. So if I want to leave it more foliage, I don't add as much water. If I want to get a few heavier areas, I just got to be careful I don't go overboard. All right, this I'll come out of camera for a minute. I'm going to turn it, tap it down a little bit, tap it that way a little, kind of just.
Boy.
Mine looks like a unicorn threw up.
Yeah, you get some unusual things going on. And what I'll do then is, now this is just looking through like a pine forest and trees and get some light coming in.
Lena Bradford has the right comment. Wow.
You can scrape a few branches that come through just to add a little more branchy look. I'll work on this later as it dries, but I just want to get some of the texture coming in because I'm going to have some trees coming down and some branches coming through the scene. Get a little bit of dark in there. Probably add some of that later, but I'll just throw it in right now. And I'm going to go into the water. I have to manage my upper part with the lower. So I'm going to let that dry. A few trees, just can paint my trunks in just by pulling through it a little bit. I'll bring those in different parts of the painting. So while that dries, I'm going to go ahead and try to tackle two at once. Whoops. Try to tackle this while managing the upper part. Normally what I'll do, but because of time, I let this dry. And then once this dries, I come in and do the bottom part because I really don't want it to run into one another too much, but I just don't have that kind of time. So I'm going to try to juggle them both. Put some of that down. All right. Oh, right there. Okay.
Doing great. It looks terrific.
Wanted to see if I was on there.
The shadows on the lower part of it, if you can move the painting up there. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna go ahead and lift that up a little. So now I want to get this glow in the water. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on this, but I'm gonna do similar. I don't really get hung up on the colors so much. I do want to reflect what's up there. And if it gets off a little bit, I'll come back and maybe throw a little bit later. So this is where you're going to think, oh my God, that's awful. That is so not going to work. Because I'm just going to throw some color in here. And we're going to do these stripes. And just so, there's so much I could have covered. Some of the things that I've done, classes that I've taken years ago. The reason why I got interested in watercolor, because when I was a kid, I didn't paint watercolor. I was doing acrylic and oil and pastel and that sort of thing. And I don't know, 25 years ago or so, I was at my father's house. My parents both passed away, but when they were living about 2 hours from me, I was up visiting, and I was in their living room, and my father had on the coffee table a book, and it was from Nita Engel, and it was a Nita Engel's watercolor book. And I looked at that, and I hadn't seen watercolors done like that. I was just blown away by what she was doing with watercolor. That was a style that I hadn't seen, and she was doing a lot of this splattering and masking and running and squirt bottles and that sort of thing. And just her landscapes that had that loose but realistic effect that I like. So I did all I could to figure out what she was doing, where was she teaching. She was getting older, she wasn't teaching as much, but she was teaching up in Michigan. So I went up and took a workshop 20 some years ago, and went back about 5 times, would go up to Michigan. Let's see, I'll read. Guess I'll pay attention here and talking. Went up to Michigan, took classes from her, really learned a lot. And she's probably the biggest reason I went to watercolor, because I really liked what she was doing. Before I get off topic too much, this is really important when you're putting a lot of water on a painting. With a number of different effects, you can really lose it. So I really do go heavy. And I know that a number of you who paint are going like, it's a little too much, Glenn. But it will dissipate and go away here. So I do go real heavy, and then I try to get this big glowing effect. And I paint while I'm wet. So any of those who are going to follow what I'm doing after we throw, or if you want to do the water, I wet this whole stream, and I do these colored stripes, starting with, if I'm doing a glow or whatever I'm reflecting up here, I do these stripes, and I try to go heavy to just bring them down, and I'm going to mix and mingle them together. So I just do various colors, dark colors near the edges, light colors in the middle, and it's wet. I try to keep it moving while I can before it dries. You got to be careful with that red, it can stain. So I do break up the red a little bit. Hopefully I don't have to do it a second time. I try to get it all at once, but it doesn't always work out that way. Just going to add a little color here and there. A little dark here. And I know it looks awful, doesn't it?
Great.
Yeah. All right.
I've learned enough already to withhold my judgment on that.
Right. Yeah. So now I'm going to mix and mingle. So forgive me, I got to pick it up. I'm just going to hope my upper side behaves a little bit. So I'm going to spray it. And I'm going to run it back and forth.
Wow. I wish Jody Ziem were watching. She's our mix and mingle spray and
Does she?
spray
love
and
it.
pour and wonderful stuff. I'll get her to watch the YouTube.
Yeah.
Glenn, what was the name of the gal that was your mentor?
Anita Engel.
Anita-
Nita Engel.
Engel.
She passed away a few years ago at like 90 some years old. I became friends with her. She worked in Chicago. She was a longtime member of the American Watercolor Society. She judged a number of shows. She was very successful at what she was doing. I'm going to put some darks in here just to get some of the trunks down. She was very successful in watercolor. Her book was very helpful, and I just learned a lot from her. And then you kind of take what you like and you use what you can, and then what you don't use is fine. But there were a number of techniques that I really liked that she was doing. Now, bear in mind, when this dries, it's going to be a lot lighter, but I like to go heavy, so I don't have to keep doing it. Some people may not, they might want it a little more subtle. So now I got a light that's going to be up here. So what I'm going to do is I want to really get that light through the middle. I'm just going to, can you see? I'm going to spray it out. Just going to run that water right down through the middle there. Just get some water in there. Oops, bring that again. And do the same thing. I'm going to turn it a little bit. And get that glow. And if you want to, you can always do those disturbances. It's a little too wet to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead just to save a little time and put a dryer on it. And then I'm going to explain it again for those people who want to try this, particularly this part of it. The throwing and splattering might be a bit scary for people who haven't done it. And you can do it a little bit at a time, or you can just go ahead and jump in and do it. Excuse me, I'm going to move this for, I don't think my extension cord is going to reach. So I'm going to move this just for a second here. So when people are ready, I'll kind of talk you through it again. So I want to do something while it's damp. A lot of times, if you look at snow, you just kind of study it, where the snow bank meets the water and it starts to melt, you get a little bit of a dark line. And while it's damp, I like to try to get some of that in there. Just kind of get a little dark line that bleeds down into the image here and there along just the edge, where when you look at snow and it starts to melt, you got that little void in there that is dark. And I want to get a couple of these tree trunks again that I kind of lost while it's damp, and let them dissipate. And put one here, so I want to get that in here while it's still damp. All right. Now hit the dryer again. Oh, and this is starting dry. You all know about salt. No real need to do a lot of salt because I have the texture, but you can throw some salt in. Also, those little droplets of water into this, kind of give a nice little effect as well. That's very similar to salt. So when you throw clear water into it, you can also get an effect like salt. So let me go ahead and dry this and show you. And then I'll talk you through it again as I explain it.
Would you like to give a lecture, Mike?
Did you mute his dryer?
No, I didn't. I don't know what happened to it. He must be in another room or something.
Yeah, maybe.
It's,
Wow.
it's a little wet, but for people who are going to stand by and give this a try, I'm going to mention it again. So I can pull a little bit of disturbance if I want to here and there. I don't want to overdo it. Some people have tendency, you can overdo it. I could have masked as well this light. I kind of lost it a little bit. I could have masked that, but mask, as you know, if you use it, just leaves a hard edge, and sometimes it's a little tricky. So I try to hesitate when I put too much mask in areas, get a little bit of that light coming through.
The yellow and orange are beautiful.
Mm.
So here's where my light is coming through the trees. This is just foliage. And then what I'll wind up doing here, and I don't know how much time I have because I want to do a couple other things, is, I'll
You're
connect.
pretty close to another hour. You're doing fine.
Oh, good, good. I have tendency to go over, so people who have to bail can bail. Okay. So eventually when I pull this mask fluid off, I'll bring trunks down and connect some dark trunks in here and down here. And so these will become trees and foliage. And I'll paint a few trunks in to give it that feel. And then you can get a few little white lines too, as probably all seen.
What are you using to scrape with, Glenn?
These are the palette knives. I
Mhm.
really like, particularly when I'm doing grass or something like that, where I want to really get a nice effect. These sharp little palette knives do a great job. Now, let's say I want some grass right here that's kind of sticking in the foreground. I'll pull up these palette knives and just kind of pull in, like in the foreground, a couple blades of grass that might be coming up here and there through the scene. Okay. All right. So for those people who want to give this a try, don't be too discouraged. This takes a little bit of practice, but really the key is when you get colors, warm yellows, reds, oranges, kind of towards the middle if you're trying to do light. If you're not worrying about light, you're just, you don't have the light coming down and you just want to do color, then it doesn't really matter. You can throw various colors all over the place if you don't want to put light in there that much. Throw the colors and then do droplets of water, whether you throw them with your brush or a squirt bottle. You just don't want to put big sprays of water into it. Like I was doing this earlier. If you overdo it, it'll just turn into a puddle and you'll lose it. So you have to kind of go slowly with the droplets of water, whether you spray them with if you have a sprayer or you want to throw water with your brush, just droplets of water, just like I did with the paint, then go back in with the water and throw little droplets in. And then watch it get to the point where you want it to. Turn it. I like to pick it up and turn it upside down, sideways, and let these run like branches. So these foliage starts to run in different directions. Turn it left, turn it right. And I even take it and I tap it, and it really forces them to go in one direction or the other. So it's not just the drops, but you got little lines going around. And then once it looks about right, I set it down. Generally, I'll let that dry. But I was able to do that without worrying about that too much. This part, as you see, I masked the bank so I can get really loose and wet. Otherwise, that would be too hard to paint around. So for this particular style, and I'll do something different on the other one where I don't mask. It's just nice because I can wet that whole area and then do my stripes of color. And if you're doing light coming through, then it's the yellows, the oranges, the reds, blues, purples, whatever it is. And I go dark to the edges because I want that to be dark on the edges, light in the middle. If it's not going to be light, I just match up the colors I have in the trees down in the water, do those stripes. And then I pick it up, and I don't want to have stripes at the end. So I just wet it and turn it just like it did for the splattering, on edge, back and forth, and let it run across the painting and up and down. Let it run while maintaining that glow in the middle. I just kind of mix and mingle it together and then set it down and then let it go. So anybody who's following along who wants to go ahead and do this, I'm going to hit this with a dryer and pull the mask fluid off. Bear in mind that I wouldn't really go this fast with a painting, a serious painting, but just so I can cover the important topics I want to show you. So I'm going very quick and knocking it out very fast. I would generally take a little more time, but I do want to get a lot of info in. So I'm going to quickly dry it, pull the mask fluid off, talk about shadows, tree trunks, and detail. Then you can detail it at your own leisure later, but I want to get the main parts out. So if you want to go ahead and start, whoever's doing it, I'm going to hit this with for another minute with the dryer, and then hopefully I can pull some of this mask fluid off and talk about the next step.
Anybody get a picture of the palette?
No.
I did. I'll post it.
Okay. That's why you get paid the big bucks, Carol.
Yeah. I think, was it Roy Fink who took pictures last time and sent them to me? They were.
Yes, it was.
It's not completely dry, but I'll try to be careful. I'm hoping this
Here's
is
a
Archie's
question
paper.
from the peanut gallery. For
Good.
Glenn. Do you always
Yes.
paint this fast, or is it just for this demo?
It's in between. It's mostly for this demo. That I go this quick just to, because I do want to get as much information out there. However, I do try to move quickly so everything mingles and gives a nice glowing effect. So I do slow down a little bit, but pretty much what I did for the creek is what I do always. The splattering, I might have taken a little more time on a serious painting, just to be a little more careful. And then later, it's just the details that I put in over top. I can say that when I teach this in a class, and I always get a different effect. Sometimes it's more glowing, sometimes it's less, different colors. So it's always going to turn out a little different. But like I said, a couple of the mistakes students will make is they'll put too much water up in the tree, not down here, but up in the trees, or they'll overdo the water and just wash everything away. So don't do too much water, particularly in trees. And then the other thing that I see is what I mentioned earlier is overworking brushwork, dab, 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 dab. We'll have a great loose effect in the trees, and then they'll come in over top and paint a whole bunch of realistic trees over top of it and completely cover it. So it's a balancing act. You got to step back and look at it. So I'm going to put trunks in and trees and branches, and then step back and look at it. But I don't want to kill too much of this color back here. I can put in, actually, I might just go ahead and do it. Let's say I want to put in a couple really dark, I thought I had them dark enough, but I might put in a couple evergreen branches coming in here at the top. So I can either paint them in with that one ugly little brush of mine, or I can throw them back in.
Is there a brush manufacturer that you really like?
For the most part, most of my good brushes are the Escoda. I like the Escoda mop brushes and the Escoda kind of the round brush that they have. So those are nice. I really like these. I think Zabukvik was, these might even be his signature ones that I may have gotten years ago that, you know, he kind of endorsed. I've taken, I think, 3 or 4 classes from Zabukvik and Alvaro Castanet and Tony Couch and various people over the years. And everybody has a different brush that they prefer. I'm going to put in some dark here, but those Escoda ones are nice. They're a little bit pricey.
I agree with you on Escoda. Great.
They and those squirrel hair mop brushes just respond nicely. You can get some, you know, cheap brushes that just don't seem to push the paint or hold the paint the way I'd like to see. Get that. Get a little bit of dark in there. All right. Do that again with the dryer. Sorry. Mike, I was thinking about it when you showed me, so it's still in my head. That aircraft carrier painting you did, was that oil?
Yes.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah, I don't normally paint in oil. I really had not gotten into anything at that point, but I kind of really like the way watercolor works. And I do have oils, and every once in a while somebody will ask for something, and
Right.
I do, but I like watercolor.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Ever since I turned away, I'll still do oil, acrylic, pastel, things like that. But it's this spontaneousness and fun that you can have with watercolor. You can go realistic and tight, or you can go very abstract and impressionistic, and
Yep.
you can get all kinds of effects. That what I really like, unlike an oil or acrylic, is if you're doing a sky, and I do teach it in my class, 30 seconds is all you need to do to paint a sky. Where an oil painting, you're pushing that paint. I'm going to hit the dryer one more time. When I do my classes, I do the first opening segment on skies, and I talk about not belaboring your skies, particularly if it's not about the sky. And it's one thing when you're doing clouds and a sunset and the painting's all about the sky, well, then you're going to take a little bit more time. But if you're doing a farm scene or some landscape and the sky isn't the main stage actor, then you don't want the sky competing with what's going on the ground. And you really shouldn't spend much time with it. I can get various colors and interest in the sky in really a minute. I could do it faster maybe, but about a minute, and you can be done. You don't have to spend 10 minutes. And when people start doing too much with the sky and you start to see brush strokes, it can get a little overworked. So I like to do my skies and not have any brush strokes and marks in it. And that's just wetting and going in quickly. And that's what I really like about watercolor. You can tackle big areas pretty quickly and mix and mingle, where with oil or acrylic, you're brushing. Sorry about the noise.
What are you using to get the masking off?
I have the pickups that you sometimes can get with them. They're like little rubber.
Yeah.
Rubber cement pickup.
Yep, exactly. And now sometimes I can actually grab the end of this and just pull it off. Just depends. The paper's still a little damp, so it may not be cooperating quite the way I'd like. I don't want to wait too long. And this is the downside to using masks, is you have to deal with this. But for this particular painting, I just want to be able to show you could really go free and loose and run the water, and you don't have to worry about painting around. See if I can get that off. It's gonna be a little wet. I left this because I'm going to be doing a tree trunk here.
What about the little circle that you left up in the behind the
Oh,
tree?
very good. Yes, almost forgot. Barely shows. I'll show you right now. When that I lost it, really. I should have got more color, but that's fine. I'll show you now, and this is something I like to use in my paintings. This particular brand doesn't really matter, but this one is these rough erasers that you would use for pen, ink, and that sort of thing. It really is helpful. This paper is probably a little damp. I maybe shouldn't do it, but I can rub out areas that I want to do. Let me grab one here. Show you one. Okay. I was messing with this earlier, just a fast sketch, and I kind of had that there. And then I can take this eraser and just lighten the area. So if I want to maybe lighten this spot that I had here, I can take the eraser. You can use a damp brush and pull it out. Sometimes the damp brush gets a little harsh. This is a slower, a little more methodical, but you don't take off as much. And I can do the same down in here. I'm hoping this is dry enough, but I'll do it on this because I know this is dry. So I was doing it earlier. I was doing these sunbeams, trying to get these little sun rays coming through. If I wanted to do that, I could. Or if I just want the light in area, and I want to get more light down in the water here, I can take this eraser and just pull it down in and slowly take off the paint and get some light areas, or even in the water over here. Maybe I want a little more streak of light coming down into the water. I can kind of take these erasers and just rub in areas, or fog, mist, haze, just kind of pull it in. So a lot of times when I'm trying to bring that light up, I might take this rough little eraser and rub it out, or I can take a damp brush and pull it out.
What's the eraser? You said it was a eraser used for pen?
Yeah, they're the ones that I used to get a lot. I'll show you two of the different ones that you sometimes get in art stores. Are these? I've worn it down so much. This is the pencil side, and this is the pen side. So this feels like gritty sandpaper.
Yeah.
I've worn it down just like this one. That's all I got left on this. Was half blue and half pink, and I just used the rough side.
Okay.
This particular eraser says sand eraser. I use them a lot painting, so they're really helpful to pull out areas kind of subtle. So I don't have a lot of time to finish this, but I'll talk about and because I do want to do a couple other things, but I'll talk about what you would do next. So obviously you can do tree branches, trunks. The important part in any of the paintings, but with the snow scene, is whatever the shape of the ground is, your shadow is going to show and form that. So if this was flat, let's see, because I have sun coming through here, I'm going to have shadows that are going to be pretty typical, the straight, almost like fanning out. So you're looking straight on. So the ones right in front are going to come straight at you. And as they go left and right, they're going to kind of fan out, but they're going to follow the shape of whatever your ground is. And if my ground was flat, they'd be pretty flat. If the ground has humps, they're going to kind of hump a little bit on there. So that just kind of defining the shape of your ground, you can do with the shadows. Everybody has their own favorite way of doing their shadows, and there's so many different things you can do. I do like in the foreground to do it on a damp paper, because I don't want the lines to be so hard. It'd be a little harder where you're closer to the tree, but when you're further away, they're kind of soft. So I do like to dampen this and add a little tint, because the snow is not white. I mean, the snow reflects and picks up what's going on around it. So it's picking up the sky and the colors. So if you have a bright lit day and you're looking right where the sun is, you're going to see more white. But in the shadows, you have blues. A lot of times, I love the color that you see on a sunny day in the snow, because it's got I don't know, like ultramarine or a cobalt blue look to the shadows. And as you get out in the light, you might even have some red and yellow. I always like to put a little red into the snow. I think that makes it a little bit interesting, especially if you have red lights coming through. You get a little bit of pink or red in the snow that when it dries, you really barely even see it. You just add a little bit of pink to it, just so it's not bright white. A little bit of pink. And here, because there's no tree right here, I don't want hard shadows. So I'm just going to put a couple, let's see, I guess this is, what blue do I want to use? Maybe I'll use my Windsor. Windsor might be a little too blue. Maybe the cobalt. So I'm just going to dance around here. It's going to look a little sloppy, but I'm just going to put little divots and shadow quickly. Oops. Just kind of quick shadows. Might even throw a few little droplets here and there, just to get some interesting texture. When that dries, that'll be a little more subtle. Mix some of that out. And up here, I don't want to go over the whole painting because I want to jump into some other things here. But so my tree, I do want to wet that a little. So let's see, I'm going to have some trees. This is a little thing I'm going to show you if I do this fast one. Sometimes I like to put the shadows in first and then the trees, because when you have a tree trunk, you wind up having to paint around your trunks. And sometimes the shadow, if it doesn't stay flowing and consistent, it gets too broken and chopped up looking, because your shadows really should be as, flowing as consistent as possible. You don't want to make it too start, stop, too streaky. You want to get a glow. So sometimes it's nice to move just quickly across without things in the way. So then I'll just kind of move it kind of quickly across the scene
Nice.
without having to stop and start around my trees. And I'll just put my trees in. And like I said, unless it's a commission where it has to be exact, I sometimes let the painting dictate how it's going to work out. The embankment here is rolling away, so I'm going to actually take a little bit of the blue up into it. Same with here. A little bit of an embankment here. And I want to get some blue up into my hillside here where the hill is. So I got different blue shadows. Darker shadows down near the bottom of these little cracks and crevices. Unfortunately, I can't take my time as much. A little bluer around the base of the tree, and then it kind of fans out, so a little darker at where the trunk meets the ground. I'm going to go ahead and paint in, just for reference, so you understand what I was doing here, a tree trunk. I don't know if anybody's ever tried this. I'll show you some other little trick. Just dawned on me. Sorry, it's my ADD or whatever going on here. Sometimes I'll just like, oh, wait. Some people accuse me of having Tourette's because I'll just blurt things out. Like, oh, what?
You haven't said anything we had to delete, so.
Oh, good.
Right. Haven't said anything we don't understand.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I'm going to try, again, the paper's a little damp. I'm going to go ahead and try to pull some of that trunk out because I want to get a little color in there. So I'm just going to put some tape down and just scrub out. That's what I like about, I'm hoping it's arches. That's what I like about arches. You can do it. You can scrub. And then I'll have a trunk to play with. So I got a little bit of white in there again, so I can just kind of get some orange and brown in this. Whoops. Just to get a little bit of glow on this before I darken it. And again, like these aren't supposed to be photographic. I'm trying to get this, loose, kind of glowing, impressionistic scene.
It's gorgeous.
Hmm.
I'm going to move quickly just so you can see what I've been thinking. With tree trunks, you want to vary them. You don't want them all the same, going in the same direction or same thickness. You want to make some thick, some thin, vary them, the direction. I'll deal with this base here in a minute. Break up a few. don't want it to get this. Green water. Nah, be more blue. Still a little wet. All right, I'm gonna have to hurry here because I don't want to waste too much more time. So I do want to jump into a couple quick things. All right, so I could work this and take my time and paint, really nice tree trunks coming down. You want to vary them, some coming down further, some stopping up here. You don't want them all in a row like soldiers. So one will be up here, one will come down further. This one may be here, one back. So you don't want them all coming into the same place. You want to give the forest some depth. So I might, bring one even down to the river's edge a little bit, just so I can give it some depth. And then paint a few branches in, a little more foliage in the foreground. I'd probably get some splattering and shrubs, a few branches. And so I'm not going to complete this here, but so that's basically the idea of the base painting. So you're going to do your own detail work. You're going to come up with how you want to handle your own details. And if this were a serious painting, I would take a little more time on the trees, to painting in the branches and the trees and that sort of thing, but just showing you how to get a texture and a glow, and then you can cover this up and the water.
It's beautiful.
Terrific.
Glenn.
Terrific.
Thank you. I'm only going to touch on this briefly. I'm not going to really get into this, but I threw this in just for the fun of it. And I'm only going to do this for just real quick. My city scenes that I've done with glowing lights, you can do with the trees. Whether I do a tree with the glow like I had.
Those are mistaken drips, but they're actually the PBO, aren't they?
Mask. Yeah, it's where I want to put some light. And my city scene that I've done similar, and I'll show you with some of these where I masked the lights. So this is just mask. It's hard to see the snow scene I did.
Oh my God.
So this snow scene that I did of Philadelphia, the street lights are just masked, and I do a similar glow with that. This Syracuse one. So there's a number of things I like to do. So just to kind of show you that I can't, obviously, with the few minutes I have, jump in that because I do want to do one other thing. But this bullseye effect that I did in the river with the stripes, you do something similar here with my sky and the light, whether it's a sun in the sky or street lights. It's basically the same thing that I do. I take this yellow, whoops, that's green. That darn paint. Oh well, I'm gonna wet it out anyway. A different brush. Very quickly. I put yellow, yellow, yellow. I juggle all these And I am going faster than normal, but I do it quickly. Red, you have to be careful with because it stains. This effect of a bullseye is the same effect with the stripe. I try to get the glow in the paper and dampen that. So I get the yellow, and the yellow's got to be kind of heavy because you lose it. Flatten this out just a little bit. And the blue, now it's running on me, but it's all right. Come in with my blue. May have to go back over with my red and yellow. This was also a last minute thought, and so I wasn't able to plan it out. I sketched out a street scene in Philadelphia. When I used to work in the fugitive unit, our job was to hunt. It was called the Violent Felony Fugitive Task Force, and we used to have to hunt people wanted on warrants, and we would do surveillance for hours and then decide if they were there and go in or not. And I would sit in Philadelphia and I would take photos and I'd sketch while I'm on surveillance. And it was fun because the guys who were in my unit would come to my art shows then later and see scenes that I did while on surveillance. And so they kind of mocked it. And the Philadelphia Inquirer did a couple stories on me about this trooper who, has a brush with the law, they said. Whoops. So I'm going to try to mingle this, but it was kind of fun because the people, you know what, before I let that go, this is not Arch's paper. I'm having trouble with it because it's not. I did pick up some stuff that was someone gave me and I was using it for sketching, and I don't believe this is Arch's. So it doesn't quite behave the way I want it to. But I do want to get this going and show you my light. Get a little more red in here. Yeah, this is definitely not behaving. So I'm going to do the same thing that I do with the stripes. Down the bottom. Get a little yellow there. Sorry, whack the camera. I'm not going to get much of a chance to see this dry. But what happens is I get a glow in the night sky by doing this bullseye instead of trying to paint it in with a brush. I get this glow, and it's a little hard to see until it dries. I'll show you the example that I have. With a little hard to see. This is a much bigger scene. Same scene. This was also like an hour sketch that I did where I masked out and then just did the glow around it and did a second one just managing it in the buildings so I could get that same glow going on in the painting.
Mhm.
So that's the idea behind that. Okay, what do I got? 15 minutes, all right. I'm going to jump into this. One more fast snow scene.
How many people have done 3 paintings, Mike?
How many are doing?
A demo.
I'm just watching and I'm out of breath. I'm not sure how anybody else can.
Right, I was just thinking you're going to sleep really well. I hope you sleep really well.
Yes, yeah. As I said, I go, and it can be a little fast at times. I do try to get as much information, show you at least the thought process, and bearing in mind I'm going quickly, so I would be slowing it down a little bit. But so as I had mentioned, I thought this was fun. I've only done it a couple times, It's nothing that I feel 100% confident. But it's a fun exercise. And if you want to loosen up and play with your brush work and just mix and mingle colors, like I said, I stumbled upon this by showing somebody splattering, and I just did it to describe the scene, and I liked it. So I think it's kind of fun practice. I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. Make sure I'm on camera here. Again, I'm going to throw and splatter. I'm going to cover again. I'm going to do the top, but this time I'm not going to mask. I'm just going to go kind of quickly. And this is a sketch. This is just for the fun of painting with just loose abandon. Just go for it and just have a little bit of fun and see how the paint reacts and mix and mingles. So it's not necessarily going to be the glow in the trees as much. I mean, I can do a little bit of that. It's just going to be painting. So I'm not even drawing it out. I'm just going to make it up as I go. I'm not even going to sketch it out. I'll just start throwing paint and see what happens. So just start throwing some colors, get that out of the way. Get maybe a little more green and not quite maybe as much light. And we'll try to do this in 10 to 15 minutes, if not sooner.
With the type of painting that you did the first painting, do you ever use the PBO on some of the tree branches and stuff beforehand, or?
Yes, and that works out well, especially if I'm going to do snow-covered tree branches, like I did with this one. You can't see, this was an oversized sheet. It was like 2 full-size sheets. Actually won first place in the PWS international show. Somebody bought it. They paid good money for it too. But that was nice. But that's what this one was, a full sheet. All the snowy branches I did mask first. And I masked it, and then when I threw over it, and when everything dried, I pulled that off, and then you just put some shadows. You can't just leave the bright white. You kind of have to do your shadows here and there on it to bring it back. But yeah, I've done that with a number of snow scenes. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of them to be able to show you. So I'll try to do this quicker. Get some greens. Now I had to wrestle with this idea because I wanted to get the creek in, and I did want to, like I said earlier, I'd like to sometimes play and get the shadows down first. And then I can kind of really get good shadow effects without having to stop and start. But when the whole paper's wet, it's kind of hard to control things. So I gotta find a way to do that. All right. Maybe a little red. There. Well, I hope that this one works as foliage, but this is just what I was saying. It's these practice, play, fast scenes, just kind of for the fun of it, similar to what I did, but without masking. And the other ones I do take, when I'm doing it on my own, I do take my time a little bit. Did not mean to do that. That's all right. That'll be a tree. That'll be a big tree. All right. So
Yeah.
a little more drops, maybe. Pick it up, tap it, get some lines going. And I don't have to. I could just do a clump of trees over in one area. I don't have to do a whole forest of trees. It doesn't have to be a deep forest. I can just do a clump here or there and leave the sky in the middle and just have a clump of trees instead of a whole bunch of thick trees. So I'm trying to move quickly again. I'm gonna go ahead and throw in my background snow, and I'm just making it up as I go, just for the fun. It's just to play and try colors. I may throw some dark in there, so I'm just going to start putting in shadows. Maybe they're going to go from one side this time. I was having fun with this a couple days ago and did a few of them, and I think I showed you in that one little video. Zigzag it around. I'm going to take my time more in the foreground with it because I'm going to try to put a creek in. So I'm just going to throw little lines in here and there. Little blobs, blue. Now, I'm going to put a creek in just somewhere. Put some color in that too. First, I'll start with a little light color. Let's see. Zigzag it back here. Oh, and I had mentioned it. I didn't really stress it so much that to talk about. When you're doing creeks, for those who don't paint them that often, or landscapes, I see a lot of times students will just do a painting, or they'll show me something, or they'll be working on something, and the creek will have this S effect, S curves. And when you get these, S curves, it doesn't look natural. It looks like you're standing on a hill looking down. So generally, if you're eye level, you're not really seeing the S curve so much. It's if you're looking from a hill, you might. So, try to zigzag them and have these interlocks where the land kind of comes out. You don't want to really have these big flowing S curves because it looks like a fun slide or something like that, a water slide. It doesn't quite look natural if you're standing eye level. It's one thing if you're on a hill and you're looking down, then that would be different. Let's see, come there, maybe come across. First, a little color. A lot of color. And then the dark. Open that up a little bit. Darks on there. So let's see if this were, if you can imagine some more tree trunks coming up. I painted over a lot of my shadows, so I'll have to get some more in.
Glenn, we just got a question which said, what black is your darkest color?
That dark color that I'm using, I have two that I'll mix to get really dark, is the perylene green, green, and the sepia. So my sepia is, I can put the sepia in there, but I also really like that dark green. It's a nice color because I used to just mix all my greens. I never bought a green until the perylene green came along, and I like that. It gives a nice dark green because I used to mix the burnt sienna with the Antwerp blue to get a nice green. Okay, so I'm going to lose this, a little wet, but I'm going to go ahead and just show you. If this were dry, I could bring my shadows across. Oops, that one got green on me because it's wet. but I started playing with this just for the fun of playing with colors and shapes. And they're always different when I do them. Sometimes I'd like to get a bit of blue back in here for shadows. All right, a little more dark up in the branches. Whoops, got that down my snow. So maybe this is a bunch of shrubs, branches, thicket, few blades of grass up here. And then the same thing as this starts to dry, because this is what I was actually doing for somebody when I was trying to explain just the splattering. Now this is too wet, but if I gave this a few minutes to dry, then I would just put my trunks in again in various places. I can even scrape out a little bit if I don't like what's going on here. Scrape a little bit of that out. Some more tree branches. Now this is just very loose and impressionistic sketches. And again, I could have waited, but I just want to do it quickly. Pull this off in a second. So I have here, let me show you real quick. But I don't know where I put them. I had them here. I had some that I did very quickly. That wasn't it, but one like this, I had some the other day I did show in my video where I did them very quickly. And it was just kind of fun to do. And my area is so messy now. So let this dry a little bit, but I like to play around and just mess with this and kind of see how it works out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll just do another one. But just in a few minutes to do a fast, loose, impressionistic snow scene that I can touch up a little bit and put some detail in if I want to. Add a little more darks here and there. It's not the right brush.
Yeah, I think I've been there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a commission.
Yeah,
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask now?
I was
You've
just
unmuted
thinking that.
yourself and anybody?
do you want to unmute everybody and see if there's any?
Oh, actually, I can't do that the way I have it set up. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
So of course that's very fast, very loose, very impressionistic, but it's sometimes just the mingling of color is kind of fun to experiment with, and you get a different result every time. I can add more droplets. I can add more colors. I can throw some little reds in there. It's just kind of fun to play with.
Glenn, what yellow were you using?
I had two. I had the Aurelian and the Bismuth Yellow. Oh, and I do have a Cad Star or a Cad Yellow.
Bismuth
So,
yellow.
yeah, the Bismuth is a very light kind of transparent yellow. It's
Okay.
actually the one that Nita Engel had, when she was doing her classes, had recommended. When I paint those, I take my time on those with the Bullseye. I have the Bismuth Yellow and I have all my colors in these little pans. And sometimes I mix them up to do the full size, really big watercolors where I take my time and do the big scenes. And for those of you, if it kind of dawned on me, I'm going to do another bounce around a little bit. Getting close on my time here. Show one thing real quick for people who I didn't get a chance to talk about my figures and putting figures. I have a lot of figures that I don't have any here. I have a lot. I do these fast sketches. These were troopers at a crime scene. But I did these fast sketches of figures and I put them in my scene, and it's kind of fun to break up the scene with it. It's not a portrait. It's just a figure of somebody walking in the scene. And I don't really take my time with them too much. I just do a fast sketch with these figures, and they kind of add a little bit of interest. And one of the things I found out, so I thought I'd pass on to people here while I had some time, is people sometimes ask when they look at the paintings and look at the figures, they ask about, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And one of the things I discovered that most people don't really know, I'm going to show a couple here. First of all, when I do them, I don't take a lot of time. I let them develop. So this one painting that I did, I put all these figures in and had just kind of started painting them, and however they developed, I don't try to plan them. Same with this particular scene. Again, it was just like that other bigger scene that I did of Philadelphia. I just start painting the figures and see how they develop, and then I go with it. I try not to pre-plan them too much. So when I'm painting them, I just try to put them in. But I got a marker here. One of the things that I saw one time at a show with two people at figures, and for those who know this, sorry. For those who don't, I'm surprised actually a lot of people hadn't really seen this before. If you're standing on the ground, street level, and you're looking down the street and you're looking at your figures should all be on the same plane, all the heads. You line up the heads. So if you're looking at a street scene and you have people, where I saw this guy, he had been in art school and everything, but he had his figures, he had a person in his scene. So he had this one person that was in his scene, and it was here because he was further away, and he had another guy who was closer in his scene. So he was here, and he had someone further away, way back. And so they put them in the scene, and I forget what he had, somebody else. And so he had another big guy, and he had him in a scene. But the problem was that the heads were all in different places. And if you're looking eye level, no matter where they are in the scene, they need to be, depending on height. Now, if you're talking a child, it's going to be a little smaller. Some guy who's 6'6", it's going to be a little higher. But the average people, they're all going to be on that same level. And sometimes people really struggle with that until they have that aha moment and they see that. So when you're looking at putting figures into your scene, whether they're far away, I'm going to use a pencil on this, whether they're far away or whether they're close, you want to keep them on that. I have to use the marker, I think. Keep them on the same plane. So I got somebody back here. Should just use paint. I got somebody back here. And then I got someone a little bit closer. The thing that changes is their feet, the legs. The legs are a little longer. I'm going to go ahead and use paint. even though it's just paper. So if this is a person here, their head's going to be roughly in the same place. This person here is a little further away. A person who's really close, the head's still going to be roughly, depending on their height, still all in the same plane.
Big guy.
Far, far away, still two people walking. Another person closer, walking in another way. Someone coming into the scene. They're all going to be, and if we were to imagine that this is a street and there or something, sidewalk, buildings, you have that line, but these heads are all roughly here. And so that's how you want to construct them. And so the difference is going to be the length of the body, how big the body is going to be when you're doing these figures. I've had a lot of people struggle and they look at the figures and they ask about it and then they'll show me what they're working on. I said, just if you're standing on the street, just do it this way, put your figures in. Now, of course, I'm going really quick. Two people together, side by side.
Yeah.
And then I like to do the shadows because it just kind of grounds them. But so that was just something I was thinking of when I was talking, and I didn't get a chance to get to my street scene with the lights and putting figures in them, is to, something to be aware of that a lot of people just aren't aware of. And once they see this and understand it, it's like, oh, that really helps me with my figures. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, thank you so much. You actually need 2 or 3 days, I think.
Right. Yeah, it's very hectic because there's so much. And, I want to give some information that I sometimes have to go too fast because I want to complete this and just give you the overview of options to throw and splatter. So let me pull this off here for a second.
Well,
We had some questions that we can't really get answered tonight. Can we just email you or?
Sure.
Website?
Yeah, absolutely. There was another one of those fast ones that I did, just like I did, like a 10-minute throw, splatter, do the creek and do it very fast. That was.
you want to
one
share
that I
your
did.
email address and I'll put it up on the chat thing.
There was another one that I did.
Glenn,
What's that?
you want to share your email address?
Yes, it is Glenn with 2 N's, GlennBlue11, the number 11, GlennBlue11 @gmail.com.
Okay, I put it up on the chat. So anybody he said he'll answer your question, so.
Yeah, if you have questions, email them to me, and I've done that many times. People even to a painting, they'll paint their painting, whatever they're working on, and then they'll show it to me and say, hey, this didn't work. What did I do wrong? And if I see it and I can get to it, I will look at it and tell you. It was fun the last time I did it because a couple people sent me their pictures and said, hey, this really worked for me. Look what I did. And it turned out well. And like I said, you just, a little bit of practice here and there with the splattering and throwing. You can do grass that way. You can do bushes, shrubs, trees, and you just play with it a little bit. And it's kind of a fun option. Actually, if you got a second, I bought Anita Engel painting years ago. She's impossible to get a painting from.
Oh,
Impossible. I have 3 original paintings of hers. They're impossible to get. She doesn't sell them. We became friends. And so she sent me this in the mail shortly before she died. I got it in the mail as a surprise, as a gift. And to show you about splattering, I left it. She still has it on the painting board with all her notes and with all her splattering of their wildflowers and masked fluid. So this is what she had done.
Wow.
And this is all splattering in there, throwing of paint, and pulling it out. Very, very similar. Now, of course, she had more time. It took her like 15 years before she got it to me. I wanted to buy it from her, but anyway, but that kind of effect, the things you can get are really interesting. You just play with it. You can throw a mask in, you can pull the mask off, many options.
Wonderful stuff.
Well, I tend to paint tighter than that, but I loved the looseness that you put in your work. Terrific. It's been a terrific. I'm watching the comments that we're getting here on chat, and they're just, the people are glowing. I mean, they really like it.
Here's one,
It's a
Glenn
great
is the
demo.
dynamo. I'll never forget this demo. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, NFWS. Thank you so much. Great demo. Great demo.
Well, thank you, thank you. Hopefully it wasn't too hectic. I know that sometimes it can be a little busy, and you can tighten it up a little bit, or you can loosen it up. So you have some options with it.
Sure.
Thank you, Glenn. It was terrific.
Great job.
Absolutely
Great job.
terrific.
Thank you.
Certainly. Email any questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
you from California.
Oh,
that?
terrific.
Who's from California?
I don't know.
Rena and Ingrid.
Oh,
Oh,
Ingrid. Oh, great. Thanks, Ingrid. Thank you for your questions too. Okay. All right,
Thanks.
everybody, I'm going to end the meeting for all.
okay,
Thank
good
you,
night.
Glenn.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Take care.
Thank you.